In a shocking incident that has emerged out of Brampton in Canada, a video has now come to light which shows a 5-kilometer long parade with a tableau of Indira Gandhi's assassination in 1984. The parade with the tableau was reportedly held by separatist groups in Canada. The High Commissioner for Canada in India, Cameron McKay, has condemned the incident. In fact, External Affairs Minister Dr. S.Jaishankar has also stated that these instances have been happening in Canada and that the government needs to take action against them as it's not good for Indo-Canada relationship. The Congress, in fact, also asked the External Affairs Minister S.Jaishankar to take up this matter with the Canadian authorities.
This float issue used, let me actually answer it, because I think there's a bigger issue involved. And the bigger issue involved is really the space that Canada has continuously and frankly to us, we are at a loss to understand, other than the requirements of vote bank politics, why anybody would do this. Because if you look at their history, I mean, you would imagine that they learn by the history and they wouldn't like to repeat that history.
Any assassination or murder is a crime in every democratic process or any democratic governance. So something which is an offense cannot be celebrated, and thus all that is happening in Canada falls within the purview of law and order, and the government of the day and the society must act upon it, else it becomes a reflection of that very society where such things are happening.
Let me now bring in my colleague Siddhant Mishra, who's joining us on the broadcast. Siddhant, even though the Canadian envoy to India has called this entire episode as very appalling, but that isn't enough. And the External Affairs Minister has minced no words in saying that you cannot be playing vote bank politics and allowing instances like this, because this is not the first time that anything to do with separatist group or the Khalistan elements have been reported out of Canada.
Well, that's right. And if they're so serious for what has happened, Greha, then the condemnation should come from the government in Canada, not from the High Commissioner's office in India. Point number one. Point number two, that it appears that they were not aware about it. And it is not the case. They are fully aware about the activities of these separatist groups. In fact, Greha, these groups have made hotel in Canada to cancel the dinner event organized for the High Commissioner of India to Canada. These are the same K groups who have been carrying out rallies, multiple protests against the government of India during that Amritpal episode. In fact, the Indian foreign offices were also attacked, vandalized on Canadian soil. Multiple times government of India has flagged off this issue with the government of Canada, but not once, Greha, not once case has been registered, or perhaps anybody from this group has been arrested or prosecuted by the government. So they may be condemning it sitting here on Indian soil. The High Commissioner may be condemning it, but this condemnation doesn't look serious. It's not serious in nature, because it is not coming from the government in Canada, and quite contrary, the situation is on ground, because and the same has been highlighted
Siddhant, I'm really sorry, I'll have to interrupt you there. I'll come back to you. Robindra Sachdev, who's a foreign affairs expert, is also with us on the broadcast at the moment. Mr. Sachdev, do you agree with what my colleague was just presenting, that just a word-of-mouth condemnation isn't enough? And this is not the first instance, although this one was clearly out of the line that has been reported out of Canada, even though Canadian authorities are saying that they condemn it, but it's not really coming in from the administration there or from the government there. It is coming from the envoy here in India.
No, thank you so much. The point is that even if the condemnation comes from higher-ups in Canada, let's say, right, what would that lead to? Okay, probably it will not lead to anything, any action. I think the bigger issue is that, there is some basics to it, right? A permission must have been sought for some kind of whatever, putting up a display and all.
Absolutely.
Now, the point is that the local officials or local authorities are kind of I mean, they are caught unawares also at times because they don't know what is going to be put up there. And we need not expect, let's say, a local official of a police force, let's say in any country, let's say, we should not assume that they would know what exactly is that, that has been put up there, what it signifies, etc. So I think the issue is that where it goes beyond the mere condemnations is that the police and law enforcement authorities in Canada have to be sensitized, have to be made aware that whenever some certain organizations, which can be mapped out, the very pro-Pakistani, etc., when they seek permissions for any public gathering or a public event, it should be examined thoroughly before a permission is given.
Yes, absolutely.
To my mind, that would be some kind of stoppage to such incidents. And then, of course, on the other hand, the big picture is that the country would say, of course, everyone is a democracy, but as long as it's within the ambit of law, people are allowed to assemble and put up any placards.
Yes, but Mr. Sachdeva, do you think it is actually going under the ambit of law? Because if we take a look at these two nations, Canada and Australia, there have been open referendums that have been called and allowed, both in Australia and in Canada. There have been, vandalization of temples that have happened. These episodes have come to light from Australia. Similar instances are happening in Canada. This one is really, really horrendous that's come to light. And yet, rather than just putting in lip service, there is nothing being done by the Canadian or Australian authorities with an iron hand. And that's where the problem lies.
No, you're absolutely on the mark, though I think that now some things are being done both in Australia and in Canada, especially, because the Indian government and even the Prime Minister has taken it up at the highest levels, including with the Prime Minister of Australia, a couple of weeks or a month ago. The issue is that, so that's a big picture, but you see, on the ground, the issue is that supposing there is a case of vandalism, sure enough, the local police should find out who did it. But if it's a case of vandalism, as would be anything, what is the fine for it? Maybe $50 fine, or, 1 week in prison or a month in prison, if it's proved and all. So there are different categories of the different kinds of incidents which are happening. Right. So fair enough, for vandalism, you can figure out who did it, lodge a case against them, prosecute them, the local authorities could do that. So that should start happening more and more. Right. Even for the most minor, whatever be the most minor punishment which can be done or prosecuted should be implemented. So that will reduce some of these incidents, because people assume, the ones who are doing it, they assume that, there's nobody out there to check them. So that's one of the physical vandalism kind of things and all. But secondly, as far as holding referendums and all, honestly, I don't know how much any country can help or even the government can help. Right? It's the citizens of a country, assuming these guys in Australia are citizens of Australia, I'm assuming. All the ones in Canada are Canadian citizens, right? So what they think, what they talk, what they do, what opinion polling they do, etc., the Canadian government has actually virtually I don't think they have any tool to stop that.
Okay, all right. Point taken, Mr. Rabindra Sachdev. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me also bring in Rashid Alvi of the Congress Party, who is with us on the broadcast. Mr. Alvi, I believe you must have heard parts of the conversation that I was having with Mr. Sachdev. Do you agree that in certain cases, the hands of Canadian or Australian authorities, for that matter, are tied? In these cases, they are really not, able to do much about it, considering these cases have been springing to light time and again. But this one has just gone way off the grid. Mr. Alvi, if you can hear me. I don't think I have that link through with Rashid Alvi. Let me actually bring my colleague Siddhant Mishra back on the broadcast. Siddhant, we have heard expert opinions on what is happening in not just in Canada but also in Australia. The fact that this entire episode of Mr. Jaishankar talking about how the Canadian authorities cannot give in to just vote bank politics. He said that in black and white. How much of that do you think is going to be impacting in this situation?
Well, there is very less impact of whatever India says or perhaps flags off to the government of Canada. Look, there are these 4 countries where this issue is going on: America, Canada, England, and Australia. Now, Australia has set the precedent. Australia has started listening to what India is flagging off, and this is a reason, Griha.